Good evening, everyone. I'm Tanya Schwartz, and on behalf of the Kardec Spiritist Group of Austin, I'd like to thank everyone who has joined us tonight for this talk. And of course, would love to have everyone in person with Sonia in our group, but this will be for later. Right now, we're very happy to have everyone here virtually. We are going to be joining Sonia. Sonia will be joining us in a minute, but meantime, we are going to give some idea how it's going to be the format tonight. We're going to have her talk, and then afterwards, we are going to open for questions. But the way it's going to work, you can, during the talk, to write on the comments the question that you might have. And at the end, we are going to be asking the question, and Sonia will have a few minutes at that time, and we're going to answer as many questions as time allows. So before we introduce our guest, let's start with a prayer, as we usually do in all our talks, involving Sonia in light and peace, and to prepare the environment for the talk. So let's concentrate, let's close our eyes and think, elevate our thoughts, asking our spiritual friends to be with us tonight, as always. Thanking them for this opportunity to have this talk that Sonia prepared for all of us about a subject that is so present in our lives these days, bringing all this information and the consolation through Spiritism to all of us. Let's ask them to inspire her so that in the name of the High Spirits, she can bring those messages to all of us. We thank them for the opportunity and for us to be together in these times, even if it has to be in this way on the screen. But we are all together in hearts, in thoughts, and in prayers, and so be it. So now, let me introduce to all of you Dr. Sonia Doi, who will be speaking about COVID-19 pandemic, medicine, and Spiritism. Sonia Doi is currently occupying the positions of President of the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Maryland, U.S. Spiritist Medical Association, and International Spiritist Medical Association. Sonia is graduated in medicine by the University of São Paulo, Brazil, with a specialization in endocrinology. And she has over 25 years of research experience in the US. So with our hearts filled with love and gratitude, let's welcome Sonia. Hi, Sonia. How are you doing?
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone joining us. Thank you so much for hosting me. I'm really grateful to the Kardec Spiritist Group of Austin that is giving me the opportunity to present this talk. As you see, it's more like an overview, but it's for our reflection on what is going on and link it with Spiritism. So it's a great pleasure, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, we are the ones to thank you for accepting, and and hopefully next time you'll be here in Austin, right? Yeah, we hope pretty soon will be our pleasure to have you here with us. So it's time now for us to turn it over to you, Sonia. So thanks again, and we'll be watching.
Thank you. So what I have prepared for tonight is this talk about the coronavirus pandemic through the optics of Spiritism, how Spiritism can help us to go through this burden that we have been confronting for several months now. So the outline of my talk, I'll start with an overview of the scientific information on viruses, and it's very brief overview. Then we're going to talk a little bit about diagnosis, treatment, and vaccine for COVID-19. Then we're going to go into the Spiritism, what we have learned from Spiritism that help us understand this pandemic. We're going to go about humanity and the planet, how healthcare providers are going through this. Then we're going to finalize with the Spiritist during the pandemic and after the pandemic. So bear with me. Starting with a general, and I'm aware that many of you joining us tonight have a deep understanding of virus, and I'm not a virologist, so I'm going to give just a very brief overview, and this is meant for people who are not familiar with, this part of science, at least. So it's just to give a brief overview of what a virus is. And here in this picture, you can see, and this is just a sketch, but that's what the virus actually is. It's a shell made of proteins, some lipids, and inside of that shell is one piece of DNA or RNA. In the case of the coronavirus, is a piece of RNA. So that piece of RNA is protected by the shell of proteins. And that's why, we have been, people tell us to wash our hands for 20 seconds or something, because there's lipids in that shell, and the soap can dissolve it. Once you dissolve that shell that protects the virus, the RNA, the RNA is very easily degraded. So it basically disappears and is no longer damaging us. It's no longer harmful. So just to have a comparison, here's how a bacteria looks inside. And I'm not, I don't want you to understand everything that is in there. It's just that you just look inside of one, inside of the other, and you see the huge difference on structures. So the bacteria has a lot of structures that help it to provide for energy, for multiplying, for all sorts of things, to produce its own proteins, to metabolize, and there's a huge amount of things that these organelles inside of the bacteria can do. Now, the virus doesn't have any of that. The virus depends on entering the cell of a bacteria or our own cells and use the organelles inside of that cell to multiply itself, to synthesize its own shell so that it can go out and infect other cells. So it depends on entering a cell. The virus otherwise is not able to multiply outside of a cell. It's not able to survive too long out of a cell. Now, talking a little bit about the coronavirus, it's a huge family that's been known for decades. I think since the 30s, 1930s, there's already accounts of coronaviruses that were found, mostly in animals, and there are classifications of several types. But the ones that became infectious to human and were most well known lately, is the SARS and the MERS. The SARS, the acronym SARS is for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, coronavirus, SARS-CoV. And the MERS is an acronym of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. So from the same family came virus SARS-CoV-2. That's the coronavirus that we have known for some months now. And it was first identified in Wuhan, like I think most of you already heard, in China, in persons exposed to a wet market where they have live exotic animals. So it's probably that was the how it originated. It was a virus that was predominant in animals, but then it suffered a mutation and started to infect and to be harmful to humans. So, and from that point on, everything is history, you already know. But this is an illustration of how a virus enters the cell, and you can see here the virus attached to a protein. This is a representation, very schematic representation of a cell. And the cells has some receptors, which are proteins in the surface that are the virus is attracted to. So each virus has a attraction or way to link to a specific type of receptor, type of protein. So there are very specific reactions occurring, but in this case, it's just an illustration. The virus connects there and then injects its genetic material inside of the cell. In this case, the RNA goes inside, and then it gets multiplied by the cell. The cell doesn't recognize that this is an RNA coming from an external source, and it processes it like its own RNA. And then the virus gets, the RNA is multiplied, it goes through the synthesis process, makes the proteins, the shell proteins, and becomes particles that can now get out of the cell, as you can see on this side here of the cell on the right side, and then they can get out of the cell. So if you think of one virus coming in the cell, there are several of them that are formed and now are ready to go out and infect other cells. So imagine how this process goes very fast. This is a fast process in the cell. And this virus has demonstrated to be very rapid, very fast in multiplying. So how do we respond? What happens to us once we get infected? So in this figure here is a very schematic figure showing a virus, for example, entering our nose. And this is the same for influenza virus, for example. It enters the nose, and once it goes, or the mouth, once it gets attached to the cell in there, it stimulates all the reaction of the immune system. And the immune system is made of several cells. And I just put some names in there for you just to kind of have a feeling for them. Macrophage, you might have heard about these cells, macrophage, T cell, killer cell, whatever. And then there are some cells that produce substances that travel through the blood circulation, cytokines, lymphokines, and these are inflammatory proteins that travel through the blood. And the cells from the immune system can produce antibodies against the invader. So if the virus invaded our cell, our immune system will produce an antibody to attack that same virus once it comes back again. So we are a machine that produces antibodies against not only virus, but bacteria and so forth. So here is just an illustration of how that happens. And it's a lot more complex than this. I'm making it very simple because that's not a science class. This is just an illustration. The viruses are very intelligent, I would say. And they can evade the immune system attack. See, when they go in, they stimulate the immune system tries to attack the virus and destroy the virus. And depending on how our immune system is, if our immune system is weak, the virus wins. If our immune system is strong, the virus or the bacteria are killed in a few days. We have a reaction, immune reaction, an inflammatory reaction, and our body is able to kill the invader. But some of these viruses, they have like a very intelligent process, and they can change their antigens, they can change their proteins, and then the antibodies that we produced are no longer recognized, or they can cause immune suppression of our whole immune system. And instead of the immune system attacking the virus, our immune system starts to attack us. So it is a very weird situation when our immune system, instead of helping us, is actually damaging our system. But this sometimes happens, and it does happen with the coronavirus. Here is just to go a little bit over the transmission. I think every one of you have heard of this because that's what we have heard over and over and over again. Be away from people. You know, this is social distancing. It explained why we need to be distant from people. The particles of viruses can travel from one person to another, can be transmitted by little droplets as we speak, as we sneeze, as we cough, depending on how strong we cough, how strong we sneeze. These particles will go farther or not. And there are large particles, smaller particles, and very tiny particles. So depending on what type of particles we're expelling, we are transmitting more virus to a certain distance. So that's why, you know, the distance from one person to another is important, because even if you're not sneezing, you're not coughing, just if you're just talking, there are particles being expelled. And there is some studies that have been coming out lately showing that this virus is also carried by aerosols. Aerosols are very, very small particles. They're smaller than 5 micron. So you cannot even see them. But when we speak, or even by breathing, sometimes we produce aerosols, and they're very light, so they float in the air, and this can be transmitting the virus, bringing the virus to somebody close to us. Then the other transmission is by touching surfaces where the virus has been deposited, by saliva, by, you know, particles that came out. And so that's how the viruses is basically transmitted so far. There's been other research that shows the virus being carried in stool. So people who have a diarrhea, for example, have gastrointestinal symptoms of the virus can be transmitted. And there's now, I don't think this is completely resolved yet, but there's some studies showing that the virus is even present in salmon. So let's talk a little bit about diagnosis, treatment, and vaccine. The incubation time of the disease is about 5 days. Then we have an acute viral phase, which can go from 5 to 10 days. And it follows with, in some patients, about 20% of the patients have a phase called hyperinflammatory phase. And that's the phase that is very, very dangerous. That's the phase when the patient is in the ICU and there's a lot of complications, and it's very, very hard to actually deal with all the complications that arise from the hyperinflammatory phase. And as I said, occurs in about 20% of the patients. So far, we don't know when you see a patient for the first time, you don't know whether the patient will evolve to that phase or not. Symptoms, you also probably know that. In the beginning, it was more like fever, cough, shortness of breath, loss of taste and smell appear, people start talking about, and then they realize that a lot of people have that symptom, diarrhea and vomiting. And in all of that, there's always an intense fatigue. And recently, they have recognized that there is an inflammatory syndrome in babies, in children, small children, and it's a vasculitis is a vascular manifestation of the disease, and it's called atypical Kawasaki disease. The Kawasaki disease was already recognized before, but it's the first time that we have seen it associated with this virus. The diagnostic tests, there's basically, I'm just going to be very basic here, 2 types of tests. One for the virus detection, which is based on amplification of the genetic material of the virus. So that's the one that they collect material through your nose, swabs of your nose or the throat. And then that collects the virus, and they extract the RNA, multiply the RNA, so the test is positive if you had any virus in your system. And this is a test that can only be done, or it should be done when we are in the acute phase or the incubation phase. But after a while, after 2 weeks approximately, then the virus is usually not easy to detect. And then we have antibodies produced by our system. Like I said before, our immune system produces antibody, and these antibodies can be detected in the blood. So those are the rapid tests that you go and they take a little drop of blood and test for the antibodies. Now there's another one called antigen, so they can do both. And this is only in the late phase, after 7 to 15 days after the symptoms. And it's based on 2 different immunoglobulins, and you can see whether one is faster, the other one is a one that's produced and stays for a longer period of time. So you can more or less calculate when you had the disease. Then this antibody detection is a test that is there's a lot of false negative. There's no false positive, but there's a lot of false negative in this test. The virus detection has a less false negative, but the antibody detection can be 50-60% of false negatives. So if you have a negative test, doesn't mean anything basically. If you have a positive test, yes, you had the disease, but if you have a negative, it could be a false negative. Treatment and vaccine. There's no specific treatment, as you have heard over and over. The current standard of care in the US, if it has not changed yet, is a drug called remdesivir, and it's not, it's not active for all of the patients, but it has a pretty good response. But there's no other that has been actually studied deeply and being approved. This is being approved by the health system. There's no vaccine available yet, and they have started some clinical testing of the vaccine. So we're hoping that by beginning of next year, we have it available. I just want to talk a little bit about the clinical studies, because there's a lot of people, I hear a lot of people complaining why we don't have medication yet, why we don't have vaccines yet. And I can attest to that. People are working, scientists are working since the very beginning and working really hard to get this. But there are, I would say, candidate vaccines, candidate medication, but they have to be really tested. There's the preclinical done in animals or cells in the laboratory. This is different from clinical studies. In the clinical studies, you have to not only see if the drug or the vaccine are effective or beneficial, but you have to assess risk, how much damage that would do, how much adverse effect will do. So you have to actually balance benefits versus risk. And a drug is only legally approved if there's a proof of more benefit than risk. There's also manufacturing quality control. So all this is tested. Where is this done? Where are the controls? How is this tested and controlled in the manufacturing? So that's why it takes so long. You really need to have a pool of patients, of people who are volunteers to be tested. And the tests mean you need to have a group of people who are going to receive the drug or the vaccine, and a group who is not going to receive it. Because if you just test the drug for everyone, you don't know whether the person who got better was just a case, a single effect, you know? It worked because the person would get better anyways. How many people we have heard out there that had a very minor disease, mild, and got better soon? So if you treat that person, you say, oh, it was the medication. It was not. So you need a control group to make sure that the effect that you are seeing, the net effect, is really the beneficial effect of the drug, is not a placebo. Let's go now talking about Spiritism. What way have we learned from Spiritism? Where we find Spiritist resources that can help us to understand the pandemic or any other calamity that goes on, and the reason why it happens. So, Spirit's book. We always go to Spirit's book first. And Spirit's book, part 3, chapter 6, Law of Destruction, question 733. Kardec asks whether the destruction will always be needed among humankind. And the spirits respond, the need for destruction will decrease as humankind evolves. We see that destruction is always followed by intellectual and moral advancement. So this is a question that covers everything, not just the pandemic, but any other calamity that goes on, even a war. Those are destructions. The pandemic is actually a destruction in a way that is killing people. In question 737, Kardec asks, for what purpose does God inflict humankind with destructive calamities? And the spirits respond, to impel them to progress more quickly. So now we understand. But we're going to go more about this, and where would we learn more? I tell you, if you have not read chapter 18 of Genesis. Please read. It's almost, the Genesis was published by Kardec in 1868. If you read this chapter, it's almost like Kardec has written it in beginning of this pandemic. It's so in line with what we have gone through. If, I read this years ago and I could never think that what Kardec was talking about was something that we were going to see. So he talks about progress, and he says progress involves physical transformations of the planet and improvement of humanity in synchrony. This progress goes side by side. So there's an intellectual progress, there is improvement of the planet, but there's improvement of humanity. This goes hand in hand. Why? Because as we develop ourselves, we need a better place to be. Or as the environment gets better, it's ready for more evolved spirits to inhabit that environment. So that's why we are actually collaborators, co-workers in God's hands to help transform the planet for the better. Because as we evolve and as we come back in our reincarnations, that's where we're going to live until we are ready to go to a higher planet. But probably for a long way of time we'll be around. So then Kardec, in the beginning of chapter 18, says, the time has come, that's the title of the chapter, determined by God for the regeneration of humanity, which entails moral progress. And he says, this is not a prophecy. This is just the law of progress. So the time has come, and this is 1868. He goes on to say, now it is no more the center of the globe which is agitated by that of humanity. And he is talking about, the first cataclysms of Earth in its infancy, when there was cataclysms, volcanic eruptions, the soil, the Earth was not habitable at that time, was not hospitable. And so those were huge transformations of the planet in its structure, in its surface, materially. Then it became hospitable. We then started to evolve in the planet as human beings. And we have been there here for quite a while. And from time to time, we see a cataclysm. We see an eruption, volcanic eruption, we see tsunamis and all that. And what happens? These are cataclysms that affects one region at a time. So now he's not talking about that. And in the chapter, he goes and explains deeply. I'm not talking about these regional things. I'm talking about a global transformation that will agitate humanity. What is going on right now? It's not the planet that, the surface, as we're going to see later, is just the opposite. But it's the humanity that is shaken and is all over the planet. And Jesus, predicting the end of the old world and the beginning of the era of restoration, affirmed that it would be announced by uncommon phenomena and by earthquakes, by a variety of plagues, and by signs from the skies. So Jesus was, of course, knew that it would come to a time when humanity needed to be pushed for moral progress. And just because here it says that the announcement would be by a variety of plagues and by signs from the skies. That talks about meteors and other things that happen in the space. And just by coincidence, in April 29, we had a huge asteroid passing near the Earth. We knew that the asteroid would not hit Earth, but would be, was kind of scary for people who were watching it and calculate the velocity and the distance and all that. It's just a question of curiosity. Continuing with Genesis, Kardec says, transformations of humanity may be preceded or accompanied by cataclysms. This is a prophecy. And he says, no, as we said before, this is just a natural phenomenon. It's the result of the law of cause and effect and the law of progress. So this, as he said in the beginning of the chapter, these things happen in synchrony. Transformation of humanity, transformation of the planet. So these things happen in synchrony. And there's a spirit that gives, two spirits actually in this chapter that gives a message, and Kardec brings us to us. And this is the spirit, Dr. Barry. And he says, humanity has reached one of these periods of growth, and its transformation has begun for nearly a century. He wrote this in 1968. A century before that, and 150 years after, which has passed since, and we are still undergoing this transformation. And Kardec talks about this in the chapter. He says there's transformations that happens through generations. You may not see in your generation. It takes generations for it to be complete, to be accomplished. And there are small transformations, the tsunami, a volcanic cataclysm, but some of them are long, takes a long, long time. And I think that's what we have been witnessing since Kardec wrote this book. And Dr. Barry says, it is within this period that Spiritism will flourish and bear its fruits. I think we're so lucky to be Spiritist and to help Spiritism to flourish through these times. Now, how humanity and the planet behaved during this coronavirus pandemic. We have seen kindness and solidarity. We have seen a lot of sadness, a lot of pain. But let's see the other side. Let's see the transformation that's already occurring. Kindness and solidarity. How many times we have seen people coming out, helping others, volunteering, making masks, taking their time to go and help somebody else. So we have been motivated to help. And this motivation happens all the time when there's a cataclysm somewhere, when there's the destruction somewhere else. So huge tornadoes, or just name it. People get inspired, people get motivated and go help. But this was really something that makes us think a little bit, what are the good things that is happening? Not just focus on the bad things, on the sad side. Let's look at the good part. And here is another interesting part. I took this picture of these pictures from Daily News, and they show how animals went, very happy and freely walking through streets in the cities. In Israel, dogs, whales, goats. India was, lots of flamingos. And in South Africa, lions just resting in the middle of the road. So this is the sign that animals were so at peace. Nature was at peace. And look at this. The planet was in silence during this period where we were just staying home. The staying home was actually keeping the planet free of the noise that we produce. The British Geological Survey's seismology team recorded a incredible drop in seismic noise. They measured this near the Gatwick Airport before February 24th, the top part of this figure, and then after March 30th, when lockdown measures were taking place. And you see the noise in the top one, how it was reduced in the bottom. And they went on to say that if Earth was always like in this silence, they could actually record, they could actually detect seismic phenomena more easily. So, earthquakes and all that would be detected more easily. How were the healthcare providers grappling with death? And here you see, this figure on the top here, you see how many of these hospitals were, these tents that served as hospitals, additional hospital beds and ICUs and all that worked when all the ICUs and hospital beds were completely full, were 100% occupied. This figure is also actually from New York, where the pandemic was really bad, with so many people dying. And during this time, they needed this, to improvise hospitals. And working in a place like that is not easy, because doctors are, trained and able to use the environment inside of the hospital, because they know where things are, they know how it works, where to look for it. When you put them in a place like that, it's completely improvised. And for the best they do to make things workable and similar, is never exactly the same. Now, in the picture down, the lower picture, I just put an illustration of respirator or ventilator. It is very complex, and not all doctors know how to work with these instruments, with this equipment. This is, usually for people who work in ICU, in emergency places, and they know how to deal with that. But other doctors who are not specialized in emergency care, they don't know. They had to learn. They had to learn and be prepared. So the doctors go on exhaustion because they're working hard, long hours, anxiety because they don't know exactly how to do that, or they are anxious to what's going to happen next. They are involved in sadness of seeing so many tragic outcomes. They are in fear for getting contaminated themselves, fear for bringing this to others, and frustration because a doctor is prepared to help people, to cure, to help them survive, and they were helpless in many cases. So lots of frustration. And this brings to a healthcare burnout. What is a burnout? Exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. They did a survey with healthcare providers in China, and they showed that 71.5% had distress, 50% had depression. Clinicians spend their career on a tenuous threshold between life and death. It's doctors, as I said, are not trained for facing death all the time. We are trained to save people, to help people. And I worked in intensive care and emergency care for about 10 years. It is very hard when you cannot really save a life. It is very hard. And when you have one after another, like these doctors, imagine how difficult that might have been, or it still is. So Chaplain Elizabeth Berger wrote a beautiful article, and she says, attending to the spiritual well-being of clinicians is aligned with current recommendations to deploy wellness supporters in healthcare systems and practices to handle clinicians' concerns. So that what she's saying is, yeah, we need to provide spiritual well-being to clinicians. They need it. And she goes on to say, more than merely a health crisis, the pandemic is also a global spiritual event. How is that? Connectedness, meaning, and purpose are essential human needs. And that comes with very aligned with the definition of spirituality. That's the full definition of spirituality. It is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to others, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. So not everybody believes in God, but she says through her research that 95% of Americans believe in God, and 76% of US physicians believe in, they may not call God, but a universal spirit or a high power. However, they may have never set foot on a church or on a place of worship, but they have that belief inside. And I have read many articles talking about these healthcare providers. They were so deeply infected, and they actually went to look for spiritual support, for spiritual comfort, things that they probably have not done before. So how we Spiritists went through this pandemic. First of all, let's talk about the role of spirituality. There are numerous scientific publications showing the benefit of spirituality to boost the immune system. So science has shown that prayer, meditation, fluid therapy, like the ones we provide in our Spiritist centers by passes or by fluidic water, help to fight infections and other diseases, including cancer. Has shown to change expression of genes and turning the the genes into a better response of immune system. They activate the limbic system, which through the neuroendocrine system controls the stress responses, including the immune system. This is known and has been proven by science, by scientific research. So what we learn from Spiritism? Spiritism tells us that the spirit, perispirit, and physical body are connected. In fact, if you want to learn more about it, I wish I had more time to go over this because it's fantastic, it's beautiful. Kardec's books, the books from Francisco Xavier, I just put some here, Evolution into Worlds, In the Greater World. The next one has not been translated into English yet, Between Earth and Heaven. These books explain in a beautiful way all that science has told us through research, but more, because what science doesn't tell us is, okay, so the process starts in the limbic system, but how is our brain activated? So many researchers call it mind, we call it spirit. So the spirit, and if you look into these books, you're going to learn, or you probably have already seen it, how beautiful the spirit connects through the pituitary, through the epiphysis or pineal gland, and the pituitary, hypothalamus, pituitary, to activate the whole neuroendocrine system and activate our immune system. So how do we protect ourselves? How we help ourselves? How we help? A lot of people ask me, how do I improve my immune system? And I tell them, just balance your spirit. Keep your mind balanced. And that is the best medication there is. There's an interesting article written by Sharon Lorsell from University of Ontario, published in 2016 about spiritual hygiene. We have learned over and over about hygiene. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Now, have we learned about spiritual hygiene? No, but it's as important or even more important than, I would not say more, but is equally important of our body, physical body hygiene. Spiritual hygiene, we come to talk about the stress, how stress causes several health issues, high blood pressure, insomnia, headaches, diabetes, all that. And yet, what do we do about that? What do we do to refrain stress, to decrease stress? We do very, very little to contribute positively to our mental or spiritual hygiene. How should we do a spiritual hygiene? Replace all the negative sentiments and emotions, fear, anger, resentment, anxiety. Replace with positive emotions and sentiments, love, gratitude, forgiveness, joy, hope. Using prayer, meditation, and strengthening our faith. So let's practice some spiritual hygiene. And also use spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence was described in the 1980s or 70s, but it's Robert Emmons who defines spiritual intelligence in a very interesting way that, it's very close to what we learn about how we clean our mind. He identified 5 components to spiritual intelligence. He says It is the capacity to transcend the physical and material. It is the ability to experience heightened states of consciousness, the ability to sanctify everyday experience, the ability to utilize spiritual resources to solve problems, and the capacity to be virtuous. And this item was dropped after he published the work because of criticism that this component refers to ethics and personality rather than intelligence. But he's talking about spiritual intelligence. So it has to talk about the capacity to be virtuous because that's moral. That has all to do with spiritual. So let's practice spiritual intelligence. Let's use our spiritual intelligence for our own benefit. And, I think most or maybe all of our audience are spiritists, but no matter what is your religion, or if you don't even belong to a formal religion, surrender to a higher power by faith. Clean your mind from negative and fearful thoughts. Find something for which you're grateful. Meditate and instruct yourself. And appreciate the value of life and those around you. Connect with others as brothers and sisters in solidarity. We need this connectedness. It's a need for us to survive, to fight depression. And remember, most important, life does not end with death. And it's so good that we in Spiritism and other people who believe in life after death of the body, that we have hope. And what happens after the pandemic? So I put 2 or 3 slides here just for us to think about it. And I go back into Genesis. As I said, if you have not read this chapter, please read. It talks about future generation. And Kardec says, during this transformations, there's a large collective departure that promotes a more rapid transformation of the minds and of the masses by removal of 2 parts. Undeveloped spirits who resist to moral progress, and many of those who are ready for the transformation, in spite their imperfections, they depart to strengthen themselves at a pure source. So Kardec says it's not necessary a complete renovation of spirits on the planet, just enough to allow new ideas to flourish. He explains that, in the middle of this big masses, humanity, there are some ideas, some people that are very resistant to moral progress. And they bring ideas that penetrate through, that pierce through, and it doesn't allow for new ideas to flourish, doesn't allow for the transformation to really occur. So then these large collective departures, as we are seeing now, have basically 2 purposes. One is to remove those who are actually impeding this transformation to occur with evil ideas. They are undeveloped spirits who will have another chance. They will have another time when they can evolve, but now majority is ready to go. The planet is ready to go, so they need to be removed. And many are ready for transformation, but they need to go to a purer place where they can evolve faster. So the present generation of spirits is not a generation of bodies, but of spirits. It's not just a recirculation through incarnation, or new spirits coming in that will gradually be replaced by a new one formed of pure spirits. So the present generation, Kardec was talking about the generation that he was living in, that would gradually be replaced for new spirits and more pure spirits. And if you read the book by Divaldo that talks about these transformations, he talks about these spirits already when he was describing the tsunamis, how these new spirits that have already incarnated on Earth are helping humanity to evolve. More elevated spirits have already been incarnating on Earth. Spiritualist ideas have been growing since Kardec time. So this is written there. He says spiritualist ideas because at that time he was just writing Spiritism. So, but now we see that Spiritism is growing. We see it growing, and we are part of it. We have a responsibility to help it grow. So how are we going to help this future generation that's coming? How are we going to be after the pandemics? We need to help this fraternity that will be the characteristic of the new generation. Fraternity based on solid faith. That solid faith, that's the base of Spiritism. So we need to be more, bring this more and more, make it available for other people. Because now is the time that people can use those information, those knowledge to build their own faith and build a world of fraternity. So we need to be aware. We have to use what we have learned through these times of isolation. We have had time to experience different situations where we were away from family and friends, where we had sometimes to be enclosed with people that we were before not staying together all the time like we have been, and facing different situations in family. So all this have been experiences that we should use for our own benefit for the future. Experiences of fraternity, experiences of consolation, solidarity. How many examples were left for us of solidarity. So we have a lot that we have learned and that we can use from here forward. And when I think of fraternity, solidarity, it reminds me of the Saint Francis prayer. And that's how I would like to end this talk, with Saint Francis' prayer that says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me bring love. Where there's offense, let me bring pardon. Where there's discord, let me bring union. Where there's error, let me bring truth. Where there's doubt, let me bring faith. Where there's despair, let me bring hope. Where there's darkness, let me bring your light. Where there's sadness, let me bring joy. O Master, let me not to seek as much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that one receives. It is in self-forgetting that one finds. It is in pardoning that one is pardoned. And it is in dying that one is raised to eternal life. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to turn back to Tanya.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And not only the information, but the reminders to all of us on the importance, the tools that we have in our hands to be able to deal with all that we're going through at this point. What a time, Sonia, for you to be a doctor and a spiritist, right? What an opportunity and a challenge all at the same time, correct? Yeah. Well, I know that we have some questions, and I'm going to turn it over to André. André Bastos will be, bringing the questions that people brought live during your talk, okay? And then afterwards, we're going to close. Thank you for now, and André, it's you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Sonia, thank you very much for this great talk.
Thank you.
It was amazing. And we got several questions here. I'm not sure that you're going to be able to go through all of them. Okay. So I'm going to pick some of them that I believe we'll be able to answer. So the first one that I want to show is this one here. Well, I was going to click and then I got a thank you. There you go. All right. So from Maria Luisa. So how is the best way for families to prepare for the decisions that have to be taken to help with the care of their loved ones?
I think this is a very personal question, I think, because every family has a different situation. What I would say is we learn so much from Spiritism. Love one another. The family is our best laboratory. It's there we have been born in this family that we are for a reason. And the best reason is to improve ourselves. It's not to improve anyone else in the family. It's for our own improvement. André Luis says that you are, the person that seems very difficult for you to handle, being in a family or being at work, is the best that the divine providence found for your advancement. So I believe that the best decision is to try to work together with the family, and instead of working against, not try to change them, but try to understand and work in a more peaceful way.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I got another one here, close to this one. So, as humanity go through this transformation, what are your thoughts on nations choosing leaders that spread division, intolerance, and that are incapable of handling such critical moments, right? Would this be part of the process? Are these tests of where we stand?
Thank you, Priscilla. I think that you already answered these questions. This question. It is, it's very difficult. I know that sometimes we have challenges, very, difficult times with leadership. And, but again, We are not here just to judge. We are here to understand that everyone has their time. They may not know things that we know. They may have never thought of things that we have by, with instructions from Spiritism or with our way of thinking we have developed to understand one another, to understand what is the right way to do things, what is the more way to do things, what is the best way to handle situations. It is always difficult. And if we put ourselves in their shoes, we'll see that is really, really difficult. It's not a simple, there's no simple way to deal with something so intense, impactful like this pandemic. So there's these two things. We have to be tolerant. We have to do the best we can, independent of any type of decision, type of leadership. We have to do the best that we can. Pray for them so that maybe they are inspired to do things better, and be tolerant. Is a challenge. It is also a part of the process for us to be understandable, to understanding, to be forgiving.
Okay, excellent answer. Thank you very much. Okay, one more here. As Spiritism, this is something that we, on the Spiritist community, we've been talking a lot about. Is this pandemic part of the planetary transition to advance our evolution? I believe that you addressed this during your presentation, right?
Yeah, I think that's why I focused so much in the chapter 18 of Genesis, because that says it all. It's right there. It's telling us exactly what we went through, or we're still going through, because it's telling us that through the law of cause and effect, through the law of progress, humanity had to progress. And if the progress is too slow, is going too slow, it needs a push. It needs there are inspirations. There are so many leaders that come and tell us about ways that we can evolve. And some people are inspired, but majority says, "Oh yeah, beautiful what you said," and go on. Right now, there's a push. It's when God thinks, it's better for all of you to evolve. So this was already in the plans. And we should be really actually thankful that the transition was this pandemic, or not. I mean, not the transition, because we are not through. This is one, and this is one thing that I would like to say. This is just one event of global event that we are witnessing right now. We don't know if there are going to be others. This is probably the climax, the top of the transformation. We don't know if there are going to be more, but this is certainly a part of the planetary transition, for sure. That's what Kardec tells.
Excellent. Thank you. We got a time for at least one more here. This just came for. First, I want to thank everybody that sent you guys sent your questions. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I wish we had time to answer all of them, so I'm just picking some of them. So the fluid therapy is very important, as we know, but right now, how can you continue that with all the isolation that we're coming with COVID, right?
Right. This is a great question, because we all belong to some spiritist, most of us at least, some spiritist centers. We are used to go at least once a week and receive passes and get our water, fluid water. And now we are not going there. So we are doing this in our center, and I believe that most of you guys are doing the same. We hold meetings through the internet every week, the same way, the same structure that we used to do in our centers, we are doing through the internet. And because we don't have, the physical passes, we take like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes for what we call vibration. And we kind of do that through a very slow pace so people can follow with us. We ask them to follow the image, and we actually are sure that our benefactors, the mentors of our spiritist centers, are applying this fluidic therapy to everyone, no matter where you are. If you are connected, you are receiving it just from those vibrations that go through line. It's not coming through the internet, but of course, the mentors are bringing the energy right where you are, and that's how we do. And we also instruct our members to have their water near the place where we are praying, because as they are praying with us, their water gets fluidified. So that's what we do, and I hope that you all can do that too.
Excellent, excellent. That's been working. We've been exercising that. That's been working.
Yeah, I think
very well. Yeah. Okay. We got one more. So since the virus is easily spread and there's no medication or vaccine so far, what do you think about some cities start opening their business and not respecting social distance anymore?
Well, I don't want to enter into politics, so I'm going to answer that from the medical point of view. And that is in line with what Dr. Fauci is saying here in the States, and the other health organizations are instructing us. As we go out in public, there's still a chance that we are infected or infect somebody else, because they have seen now that there are many people who are asymptomatic. They have no symptoms, but they're still carrying the virus. So we might get in contact with someone who's infected and get infected. Or maybe we don't even know and we have the virus and we are infecting others. So it is important that we keep on wearing masks. It is important that we still keep distance. In most places in the United States where they have already relaxed these orders, they have recommended that no more than 5-10 people are together in a small place. So, for example, our spiritist meetings are not have not resumed because we cannot do that. And so I would say we need to be careful. The other thing is I have seen some authorities that they have recommended that they are going to be monitoring the number of patients, of people who get infected, the number of beds that are occupied in hospitals. If that starts to grow, they will go back. So I think that we need to keep protecting ourselves until vaccines are available.
Correct. Okay. Thank you very much. I guess we have time for one more. That's very interesting. Why do good people have to suffer with the planetary transition? Suffer is the question.
Okay, that would be a very long answer.
Right.
We don't have much time now, but let's make it short. Suffering is, it depends on how you see suffering, right? There's good suffering and bad suffering. You could suffer, meaning you are in pain, you lose someone in your family, or you have to be working and being afraid that you get contaminated, or you cannot even work and you are going through a very hard time because resources are very little in your family. So there are several circumstances where we can suffer. Now, with understanding what is happening, to an understanding that we are not the only ones suffering, I think brings a better way for us to get through this. And also, we need to see the good part of it. As I showed in some slides, there's always good things. And the best of all is that after all this passes, we are going to be so happy to hug one another. We're going to be so happy to see each other. We are going to, all the things that we always take for granted, now we are going to be grateful for. And that's going to be a good feeling for us. So now, suffering, pain, it's something that everyone, since we are in this world, we are not perfect. We are in a very low level of perfection. So we have to go through. Once we evolve, we'll be in a better situation. We won't be like that. So we can handle that with resignation, with understanding, with our faith and hope. And then it would be much, much easier to go through it. So we need to make ourselves stronger, to get our faith stronger. And what is this faith? What is the faith helping us to understand? To understand that everything passes. This will pass. This shall pass. And after this passes, we're going to be better off. And our faith tells us that nothing happens without God's permission. And everything has an objective. So this has an objective. And the objective is good. The objective is for us to improve. So it's almost like you have to take a medication, and it's a horrible medication, but you have to take it to be cured, to get better from disease. So that's the medication we need right now.
All right, excellent. If we were not sick, we wouldn't be needing this medication. So yeah, excellent. Okay, so I believe that we are getting close to the end of this presentation. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for watching it. And I would like to invite you, Sonia, to do our final prayer as we approach the closing of this first live presentation Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I'm very honored to be, the first in this series. But now I'll invite you all to relax your physical body and concentrate on your emotional body, which is within your perispirit. Let's see ourselves illuminated. Let's see ourselves involved in this beautiful vibration of love and peace that is brought to us by the mentors, by the benefactor spirits. And we are so grateful to the Almighty for being able to be together in situations like this, for being able to get connected, for being able to help one another. And we are grateful to our Master Jesus the doctor of souls, whose examples and teachings have helped us to go through our paths of evolution. And we are grateful for Jesus to send us the consoler, the Spiritism that brightens our view, that help us to understand the divine laws, help us to understand the reason for things that would look like a bad situation, like this pandemic, but we can see it with its objective, and we can see that we are getting through it. We can see ourselves getting to the other side, involved in light. And with our hearts full of gratitude, we ask the benefactors to bless the Kardec Spiritist Group of Austin and every one of you who have joined us tonight. And so be it.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Sonia. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite back Tanya
Hi.
for closing.
I'm here, still in this peaceful mindset with your prayer, your words, bringing to us in this community, the doctor community, right? To bring the words for consolation, spiritism, everything that we have in our hands to go through this really with so much more hope in a better time. And again, thank you so much. I want to tell everyone before we let you go and let everybody go that on Tuesdays we study, our group studies the gospel. We've been having a lot of vibrations meditation online, as probably everybody else, like you said, trying to keep up with our spiritual our spirituality does not participate in the pandemic. We're continuing strong together here to be able to help our immune system and our friendship to grow in this fraternal time. So we continue. Please, really, I would like to thank again everyone who is here with us. Continue being strong and be safe, taking care of each other in all senses, not only physically, but also spiritually, and helping those around that we are, that we can at this time. So with that, I would like to ask one last thing for you, and then we'll finish this meeting. Would you like to leave us final message at this point?
I think the final message is a message of hope. It's a message that we are enduring a difficult time right now, but it's for a good and beautiful purpose. And we should be involved in hope, because we are going to get through and be in a better world. And we may not see the complete transformation in our generation, but we are going to be coming back. Maybe by the time I come back, the transmission has passed. And I hope I'm in the good part of the world.
That's right. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, and hope everybody's safe there in Maryland, right? And we thank everyone. Hope to continue seeing you guys when we have other guests. Bye, Sonia Doi. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone. Good night and be safe.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.